Hello everybody, this is Dr. Vishal Trivedi from Department of Biosciences and Bioengineering, IIT Guwahati. Welcome back. So far we have discussed about the different factors, and we have discussed about few of the factors which are actually playing crucial role in regulating the rate of photosynthesis. And so there are many factors which are still be pending, and those are the factors which we are going to discuss now. So if you going beyond the light saturation point or the saturation point, you are going to have an effect called solarization. Solarization is going to have the two impact. One, it is going to do a photo inhibition, and similarly it is also going to do a photo oxidation. So what is mean by the photo inhibition is that the very high radiation of the light energy is going to reduce the efficiency of the photosynthetic machinery. This impact is more for the photosystem 2 compared to the photosystem 1, because the photosystem 2 is more susceptible for the high radiation. Similarly, in the case of photooxidation, the photooxidation means that the very high radiation is going to destroy the photosynthetic pigment. So, in this there is a destruction of photosynthetic pigment. So, that actually will cause the damages of the active center or the photocenter. This means it is going to destroy the ability of this photocenter to trap the light energy and use it, allow it to use it for the chemical energy. On the other hand, it is also going to destroy the downstream photosynthetic machinery, means it is going to destroy the electron transport chain as well as the downstream machinery. So, because of that, the plants are actually having the carotenoids. So, carotenoids are actually working like an antioxidant, and this photooxidation is going to be very much reduced in the presence of carotenoids, because they have the antioxidant activity. So, during the photooxidation, if there is a immersion of electron or the free radicals, that is going to be quenched by the carotenoids on the number 1. Number 2, the carotenoids are also going to give the shielding effect around the chlorophyll molecules. So, what they will do is they will absorb the high radiation energy from the sun, and then they will pass on that energy to the chlorophyll under the very high light intensity, which is above the saturation level, to minimize the solarization effects. So, this is about the intensity. Now, we will talk about the duration. So, the duration of the sunlight, so longer the duration, the better would be the photosynthesis, and most of the plants actually do a very good photosynthesis in a daytime, and the longer the daytime or the longer the light intensity, duration of the light intensity, that supports the photosynthesis. And now, we will come to the quality of light. So, what is mean by the quality of light is that the particular radiation of a particular wavelength. So, you know that the visible light has one end, it has blue, and on the other end it has a red, means on the one hand it has the 400, the other end it has the 700. And so, this is actually the range in which the photosynthesis is very efficient, and that is why the 400 to 700 range is called as the photosynthesis active zone. Active radiation or PAR, where the blue and the red are giving very efficient photosynthesis. In the case of blue, in the case of red, the energy is low. Even then, the maximally the large quantity of energy is absorbed. So, that is why the efficiency is very high. In between, you also have the green. So, the efficiency or the quantum yield is minimum for the green, it is moderately high for the blue and red. Also, both the blue radiation as well as the red wavelength are supporting the very high yield of photosynthesis, and as far as the production is concerned, the red light is mostly supporting the production of carbohydrates, whereas the blue light, which is actually a high energy light, is supporting the synthesis of proteins. Okay. Now, in this connection, people have tested the different types of light and its effect on the photosynthesis, and what they have done is they have illuminated the light with the different wavelength. Okay. So, when they have illuminated the light of different wavelength and they have measured the carbon dioxide fixation or assimilation over wavelength. So, what they have found, so this is the 400, this is the 700 and this is the, so in between you have other wavelengths. So, what they have found is that the CO2 assimilation is pretty high in other wavelengths as long as they are going below the 700, but as soon as they are coming to the 700, the CO2 assimilation is dropping down very big time, and that is how this effect that they have a very decent CO2 assimilation in the other wavelength lower than the 700 nanometer, but as soon as they are entering into the red zone, means beyond the 700, there is a severe drop of the CO2 assimilation, and they have called this particular kind of phenomena as the red drop or the immersion effects. They will call it as the red drop. So, to understand this process, the immersion has done a systematic experiment. What he has done? He has illuminated the light, he has illuminated the plant with the different wavelength, and then he has supplemented that wavelength with the other wavelengths. Means he has first illuminated with the wavelength number 1 and then he has illuminated with the wavelength number 2 or the combination. So, doing this kind of combinatorial experiment, what he has observed, that if you see the rate of photosynthesis, so this is at 670 nanometer and this is the red drop, means 710 nanometer, and then so this is like this and this is like this. Okay. So, what he has observed, that if it is illuminating the sample with both the 710 nanometer So, this is the 710 nanometer, this is the 670 nanometer, okay, and this is the extra what he got, and this is what is called as enhancement. So, and that is how the effect is called as the immersion effect. Immersion enhancement effect. And so, what is mean by that? When he illuminated the plant with 670 nanometer wavelength, he could see a rate of photosynthesis. But then when what he has done, he has again illuminated the same plant with 710 nanometer, and he could see the similar kind of observation that there is a significant drop of the photosynthesis activity. But when he has could find that when he has illuminated the plant with the both of these wavelengths 670 nanometer as well as the 710 nanometer, he could see not only the cumulative effect, he could see way more than the cumulative effect of the photosynthesis what he was getting in the individually when he was illuminating this plant with the separate wavelengths. So, what he could see that there is a significant enhancement in the photosynthesis when he was illuminating the plant with the wavelength of 670 and 710 nanometer together, and that actually proves the 2 point. One is that there is a cooperativity between the in the different types of wavelengths, and that actually proves the point that probably there is a two pigments or two photocenter are present in the plant, and that is how he has actually explained that it is maybe that it has two photocenter, the photocenter 1 and photocenter 2. So, and one of the photocenter would be of 670 nanometer and the other one would be 710 nanometer. And what is happening is that when you are providing a wavelength of 670 nanometer, you are not exciting the photosystem 1 or the other photocenter, but when you are providing the 710, you are not exciting these other photocenter. But when you are providing a combination, you are actually exciting the both photocenter, and that is how the photosynthetic yield is very high, and that is how he has proved that there are two photocenter or two different types of photocenter present in the chloroplast molecule. So, now we will go back to the next is the carbon dioxide. So, in the case of carbon dioxide, the atmospheric carbon dioxide, the level of atmospheric carbon dioxide is approximately 360 ppm, okay, and the so the C3 plants are less efficient in terms of fixing the atmospheric carbon dioxide than the C4 plant, and as a result this particular wavelength, this particular concentration of CO2 is not optimal for the C3 plant, whereas the C4 plant could be able to do the photosynthesis at this point. To understand, let us see the PowerPoint slide, and what you will see that in the case of C3 plant, the 360 ppm is below the optimal, and that is why what you will see that the C3 plants are doing very low level of CO2 fixation in the low light, but that can be compensated when you have the high light present on the C4 plant. Whereas, for the C3 plant you need at least the 500 ppm carbon dioxide to show a optimal photosynthesis. Whereas, in the case of C4 plant, the 360 ppm is good enough to give you the optimal ppm. See, why the C3 plants need the 500 ppm as a concentration? Because if they will use the 500 ppm CO2 concentration, that actually is going to reduce the level of photorespiration, which is actually a real problem of C3 plant. Photorespiration is almost negligible in the case of C4 plant. Then it also going to increase the level of rubisco which is present in this plant, and on the other hand it is also going to increase the level of substrates which are present. Contrary to that, the C4 plants are good enough at 316 ppm, and that is why it is good, it gives a very good yield. Similar to so as we discussed for the light, that there is a light compensation point. In the case of carbon dioxide also, similar to light what we have discussed, that the light has a compensation point, the carbon dioxide also has a compensation point. So, at the point at which the CO2 fixation is, so there is no net, so at the point at which there is no net absorption of carbon dioxide by the illuminated light from the environment is called as the CO2 compensation point. This value is 25 to 100 ppm in the case of C3 plant, whereas in the case of C4 plant it is approximately 10 ppm. This means the C4 plants are more efficient, even if you are reducing the carbon dioxide, and that actually is going to affect the photosynthesis. They will be getting, they will be still be able to manage with the 10 ppm carbon dioxide to have a low level of photosynthesis, whereas in the case of C4 plant they will not be able to do anything if the carbon dioxide level is below the 25 ppm. So, most of these plants will not survive longer if will not be able to survive longer if there is a CO2 compensation, if they will stay in the, if they will remain in the CO2 compensation point for longer period of time. Now, we will go back to the next factor, and the next factor is, so apart from the carbon dioxide, temperature is also very important. So, if the temperature is increased, if the temperature is increased from the very minimal to optimal, it actually increases the rate of photosynthesis to some extent, and then once it is goes beyond the optimal, it actually reduces the photosynthesis. To understand, you can see graphs on the PowerPoint slide. What you can see that if the temperature is raised starting from the 5 degree to 40 degree, there is a increase in photosynthesis in the case of C4 plant, and then it goes for there is a decrease phase. Okay. Similarly, for the C4 plant also, it is also increasing in the beginning, and then it is going down beyond the 40, and in the that also you can see here that if you are increasing and then it is going down with the temperature. This decrease in photosynthesis with time is called as the time factor. Both in the case of C3 as well as both in the case of C4 plant, why they go down after some time? Because as you are increasing the temperature, you are actually initially it is actually increasing the availability of the availability of carbon dioxide and oxygen, but after some time it has its reverse effect, because as you increase the temperature, you are actually disturbing the ratio of carbon dioxide and oxygen, and that actually going to affect the photosynthesis in a multiple ways. One, what is the multiple ways? So, as you increase beyond the optimal, and that we have discussed, it is actually you are going to induce the photorespiration, because the photorespiration is high on a higher temperature. Number 2, as you increase the temperature, you are actually going to disturb the carbon dioxide and oxygen ratio, and that disturbance in the carbon dioxide to oxygen ratio, you are actually going to induce the plant to go for the photorespiration. And you know that the photorespiration is eventually going to affect the plants. Similarly, there are the enzymes which are present in the C3 plant as well as the C4 plant, which are thermolabile. For example, in the case of the C4 plant, so as you so it has an enzyme known as the pyruvate phosphodikinase, okay. And this particular enzyme is the sensitive, it does not work beyond the beyond 12 degree temperature. So, it is a thermolabile enzyme. Similarly, the Rubisco is also getting affected, its activity is going to be modulated at a high temperature. Now, let us discuss about the another factor. The another factor is the carboxygen. So, as we discussed for the CO2, the oxygen is also affecting the photosynthesis. The oxygen is actually inhibitory for the photosynthesis rather than it is stimulating, and oxygen is inhibiting the photosynthesis, that is discovered by a scientist known as Warburg. So, what Warburg has observed that while he was studying the photosynthesis from the blue green algae, what he has observed that whenever he is purging the system with the oxygen, that actually is reducing the level of photosynthesis, and that is how this effect, that oxygen is inhibitory to the photosynthesis, is known as Warburg effect. Okay. So, how it is happening? So, now suppose what this mean is that suppose you are following the rate of photosynthesis. Okay. So, if you follow a rate of photosynthesis and you follow a rate of photosynthesis at normal oxygen level, like 0.5%. Okay. So, if you are doing in a artificial system and if you are doing the photosynthesis at 0.5% oxygen, you will see this pattern. But if you increase the oxygen in the system, what will happen is, so this is the 21% oxygen. Okay. This drop in photosynthesis is, or photosynthesis rate, is what is known as the Warburg effect. And why the plants are exhibiting the Warburg effect? The plants are exhibiting the Warburg effect because the oxygen is disturbing the several processes which are happening within the chloroplast. What is these processes? Oxygen is working as quencher, okay, to the excitation state of chlorophyll. What does that mean is that when you are purging the large quantity of oxygen into the system, the oxygen is not allowing the chlorophyll molecule to go for a higher oxidation state or higher excitation state, and because of that the chlorophyll molecule will not be able to do or will not be able to exclude the electron from the photocenter, and that is how it is going to affect the downstream photosynthesis process. If the oxygen level is high, that actually will convert the RUBP carboxylase to RUBP oxidase. Now, if that happens, what will happen? If that happens, and you know that what we have when we were discussing about the photorespiration, we have said that this is actually the crucial problem, that when there is a high level of oxygen, the RUBP is changing its active site or changing its affinity from the carboxylase to oxidase. Well, as soon as this happened, you are going to see a increase in photorespiration. Number 4, apart from disturbing the electron, it is also going to do the oxidation of photosynthetic machinery. So, if you are providing the large quantity of oxygen, you are actually forcing the system to go for oxidation, and in this there is a oxidation of photocenter, the oxidation of the different types of pigments as well as the enzymes, and downstream the electron carrier and transporters, and all that will going to happen. So, as soon as you increase the oxygen into the system, it actually going to destroy the photosynthetic machinery. Now, we will take up the next factor, and the next factor is soil water. The water which plants are taking up from the soil are also affecting the photosynthesis, but only the 1% of soil water is being used in photosynthesis. Apart from that, means the 1% of the soil water is being used in the process of photosynthesis, and where it is being used? It is being used where you are actually doing a photolysis of water, and that is actually giving two, that is giving the electron and that is giving the oxygen, and that oxygen is going out, whereas this electron is going into electron transport chain to produce the ATP as well as the NADPH. So, if that is only the 1%, how the soil water is going to affect? The soil water which plants are taking up is mostly being used in following processes. Number 1, the soil water is being used to maintain the temperature of the plant. Number 2 means an adequate temperature of the plant, which is good for the photosynthesis, can be maintained by the vascular system around the photosynthetic machinery. The second is because the plants are actually filling the stomata and stomata's guard cells, they are also regulating the opening and closing of stomata. So, they are also affecting the opening and closing of stomata. Number 3, water is also being used in many of the reaction as the reactants, and that is how the water is also going to affect the biosynthesis of many of these factors. Water is also be a good source of different types of minerals which are also important. So, that is also another factor, the minerals which are going to affect the photosynthesis. So, what are these minerals? The number 1 is the magnesium, okay. And where the magnesium is being used? The magnesium is being used in the synthesis of chlorophyll. If you remember, the magnesium is actually the metal which is present in the center of porphyrin ring. Then what you need? You need manganese chloride and the calcium. Where is this used? The manganese chloride and calcium. All these three are being used for photolysis of water. Number 3, you also need the iron and copper. Iron and copper is used for biosynthesis of chlorophyll. Number 4, you need the phosphorus. Now, for what you need phosphorus? Phosphorus is required for this reaction. Means if there is no phosphorus, you are not going to have the inorganic phosphate, and that inorganic phosphate is required to recycle back the ADP to synthesize the ATP. That is why the phosphorus is required for ATP synthesis. Number 5, you need the potassium and you need the sulfur. See, potassium and sulfur are actually the required coenzymes or required metals for the activity of different enzymes which are participating in the photosynthesis. Number 6, nitrogen. So, the nitrogen is a basic component of many things. Nitrogen is a basic component of the chlorophyll. So, it is actually being required for as a basic component for chlorophyll, for proteins, because if you remember, the amino acids are made up of amino group coupled to the carboxyl group. So, amino group is made up of nitrogen. Then it also needs the is required for electron carriers. Many of the iron sulfur clusters are containing the nitrogen in their unit, as well as the chlorophyll contains the pyrrole ring that also contains the nitrogen. Now, these are the environmental factors. Apart from these, since the plants are also present in the outside environment, they are also being exposed the different types of the air pollutants which are present in the environment. I am sure the plants are also being exposed to the water pollutant as well, but we are not discussing about the air pollutants. We are not discussing about the water pollutants. We are only going to discuss about the air pollutants. What are the air pollutants which are going to expose or going to affect the plant? These are dust, smoke, fly ash, is the hydrogen fluoride, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide and the nitric oxide. Okay. And in what way these molecules actually absorb will affect the photosynthesis? Number one, they actually can reduce the light intensity. So, if there is a dust, there is a smoke, there is a ash which is covering the plant or which is actually suspended in the air, that actually going to reduce or that is going to reflect the light which is coming from the sun, and that actually is going to reduce the light intensity. And as we have discussed already, if you reduce the light intensity, it is going to affect the photosynthesis. Number 2, you know that the leaf contains the stomata, and these stomata are tiny pores which are present on the skins, which is present on the leaf. So, these stomata are being used for the gaseous exchange. So, they were being used to take the carbon dioxide and they are being used to put the oxygen out. So, if there is a these molecules, if you have the dust, smoke, fly and all these kind of molecules, they are going to block the stomata, and as soon as you have the blockage of the stomata, that actually is going to reduce the availability of carbon dioxide as well as the oxygen. Number 3, many of these molecules are also having the inhibitory activity for the electron transport chain. For example, like dust or smoke, they contains the heavy metals, and these heavy metals probably could disturb the electron transport flow. Number 4, they can also be inhibitory for synthesis of photosynthetic machinery. Means many of these factors may not have direct effects on the photosynthesis process, but they may reduce the availability of the photosynthetic machinery by inhibiting the enzymes or by reducing the availability of the raw material which is required for photosynthesis by synthesis of the photosynthetic machinery, whether it is the pigments or whether it is the pyrrole or whether it is the availability of the molecules. For example, if some of these molecules are going to block the entry of nitrogen or block the entry of any of the crucial molecule which is required for the synthesis of chlorophyll, then it is going to eventually going to affect the photosynthesis. Now, these are the environmental factors what we have discussed. Now, we will discuss about the plant associated factors. Okay. And the first plant associated factor what we are going to discuss is the condition of the leaves. So, as far as the leaf is concerned, you can have 3 different types of leaves. You can have the developing leaves, you can have the mature leaves, and you can have the aging leaves. All these leaves are having the different degree of photosynthesis. So, if you plot the photosynthesis as per the age of the leaf, what you will see is like this. Okay. So, these are actually the developing leaves, these are mature leaves, and these are the aged leaves. Okay. So, this means as the developing leaves are maturing, they are actually making the more and more photosynthesis. We have already discussed between the difference of mature leaf versus the aged leaves, why there is a decline in photosynthesis when the leaf is getting aged, because the aging leaves are having the good photosynthesis machinery. Whereas this one has bad, or it is actually losing the molecules from the leaf. So, that is why it is not going to support the very good high rate of photosynthesis. Why the developing leaves do not give the high photosynthesis? Because the developing leaves does not contain very high content of chlorophyll. So, as they acquire the more and more of chlorophyll, they go for the their maturation, and then they finally achieve the mature leaves. Apart from that, the chlorophyll content is very high in the case of mature leaf. Okay. And that actually is going to decide whether which particular species is going to do better photosynthesis. Apart from the age of the leaf, the position of the leaf as well as the anatomy of the leaf is also very important. So, within the leaf, what you have is you have the age of the leaf, then what you have is the anatomy of leaf, and number C, you have the position of the leaf. So, anatomy means if you remember, when we have discussed about the anatomy of the leaf of a C4 plant. So, anatomy means if the leaf has the stomata, and these stomatas are allowing the free movement of carbon dioxide as well as the oxygen, but inside if you have a very high quantity of mesophyll cell. So, if you have the very high number of mesophyll cell, number one. Number two, if you have very high content of chlorophyll per mesophyll cell, and number three, if you have the good position of stomata, so that you actually can allow the exchange of gases. Number four, if you have the air spaces, so that you can have the better gaseous exchange between the leaf and the external environment, that actually is going to give you the better photosynthesis. Similarly, the position of the leaf. The position of leaf means the place where the leaf is situated as well as the orientation. So, if the leaf's orientation is toward the sun, it is going to get more and more sun. For example, if you have a plant like this, okay, and suppose it has two leaves, one is this way, and suppose imagine the sun is coming from this side. Okay. So, there is a leaf like this which is perpendicular to the sun. So, it is going to expose or going to get the maximum quantity of radiation which is passing through the leaves. Similarly, you can have a leaf like this. Now, in this leaf only the top portion is going to get the radiation. There are leaves which are going to be on the back side of the plant, so they also will not get the high quality radiation, and that is how this leaf is going to give you the better photosynthesis, because its orientation in such a way that it receives more radiation and compared to the other one. Apart from leaves, we have already discussed about the chlorophyll content. Okay. Number 3, what we have is the carbohydrate. So, the carbohydrate, which is actually the product of photosynthesis, is also going to have the feedback mechanisms. For example, it is always been observed that in the afternoon, when there is a very high photosynthetic activity, there is a very high accumulation of carbohydrate in the leaves, and because of that carbohydrate has a feedback mechanism to block the photosynthesis or to reduce the quality of reduce the rate of photosynthesis, so that the plant will get some time to absorb the carbohydrate what it has prepared by taking the light from the sun. And as soon as the carbohydrate level goes down, then again the photosynthesis blockage is being removed, and then again the photosynthesis take place. Similarly, you have hormones, the plant hormones. So, different types of plant hormones are actually affecting the photosynthesis in a multiple ways. There are plant hormones which are actually supporting the synthesis of plant pigments like chlorophylls and other kind of plant pigments, and on the other hand there are plant pigments which are actually regulating the movement or the orientation of the plant in within the either by making a particular movement in the branch or movement in the leaf orientation itself. So, with this, so what we have discussed, let us summarize what we have discussed so far, and so what we have discussed in photosynthesis. What we have discussed, that the photosynthesis has two different phases. One is called light phase, the other one is called the dark phase. Within the light phase, you have two different components. One is called light harvesting complex 1, the other one is called the light harvesting complex 2. Both of these complexes are working together to help in the photosynthesis, and in what way they are going to help. Both of these complexes are going for a cyclic as well as acyclic photophosphorylation and because of these two events, eventually they are generating the ATP as well as the because of that they are generating the ATP, whereas both of these light harvesting complexes are also doing the electron transport chain, and that is actually producing the NADPH. Both these and this, both of these reducing equivalents are then available for the plant to be used in the dark reactions. Within the dark reactions, we have discussed the C3 cycle, we have discussed about the C4 cycle, then we have also discussed about the C2 cycle or the photorespiration, and then within the C4 cycle we have also discussed about the CAM metabolism. Ultimately, at the end, what we have discussed, we have also discussed that how different factors are affecting photosynthesis, and most of these factors as well as their effects are being observed by doing a series of systematic experiment which are done by the several scientists, and that is also we have also discussed. So, we have discussed about the experiments which are being done by these scientists to understand how these factors are affecting the photosynthesis. So, within this experiment we have also studied how the different scientists who have contributed the groundbreaking experiment or the observation related to photosynthesis, and what are the different experiments they have performed. So, with this we are almost done with the discussion about the photosynthesis, and I hope you might have understood that the photosynthesis is one of the initial processes which are being adopted by the living world for two purposes. One, to assimilate the carbon dioxide which was abundant in the primitive environment for producing the sugar, or I will say for the food, and at the other end it was only the process which actually started evolving the oxygen in the primitive environment, and that is how the primitive environment which was more reducing in nature got converted into the oxidative in nature, and because of that particular kind of transition the existence of the life could be possible on the earth. So, with this kind of brief discussion about the photosynthesis, we would like to conclude our lecture here, and I hope you might have enjoyed the lecture and its content, and it could have been useful for you. Thank you.